Welcome back to this 2016 special coverage of the municipal elections that took place in South Africa yesterday. Results are slowly coming through, but we're certainly bringing you analysis on the various elements that are taking place. But you can also give us your feedback and share your thoughts and opinion as to how things might swing and change going forward. You can tweet us at CNBCAfrica using the hashtag YourVoteOn410. Well, we still continue with our post-analysis of the elections and the outcomes for investment and business. We're also joined by Dr. Adrian Saville, Chief Strategist at Citadel. Always good to see you.
Thanks, Hugo.
Thank you so much for coming through. Let's get a quick overview, though, of your take on the numbers before we get further perspective on the EFF, which we were talking about just before the break. But your thoughts on the outcome so far? Very tight. Looks like things are swinging in either direction.
Yeah, I think that captures it. I'm reminded of Brexit.
Which no one saw coming, right?
No one saw coming. Yeah, you know, it's a work in progress. The numbers are coming in quickly. We should have the final result, you know, or very close to the final result within a couple of hours. We should have a good sense of what it all looks like, and there'll be some, you know, rounding numbers in the final 24 hours. So it should all be said and done by this time tomorrow. But it's yeah, it's an interesting balancing act, and I think that the one attribute that I would really underscore is what this reinforces is South Africa's institutional fabric. You know, the fact that we have yet again hosted a fair, transparent, well-run election.
And what sort of reaction are you getting from the foreign investors that you talk to? I mean, this is, as you say, it's a plebiscite, it's peaceful, it's stable, it's well-run. What's the view they're giving you?
I don't think that this, in and of itself, is enough to change the sentiment around South Africa. You know, if anything, to me, this is a reinforcer of a well-established view. You've had this point made on a number of occasions by the ratings agencies in particular. They've been most vocal, you know, talking about South Africa's democracy, the institutional strength, and so on. And so this is really just a reinforcer. And the fact that it's been well run and well conducted, there have been a few, you know, minor events, but overwhelmingly, it's a great outcome. And that, I suppose, just is reinforcing evidence or confirming evidence. Perhaps, you know, it would be if this hadn't transpired this way, you would see a spectacular result. But, you know, as it stands, it's, okay, nothing's changed, we can go on as it was.
Just before you came, we were taking a look at the results, analysing them on screen here. We were going to the heartland of the economic freedom fighters of Limpopo. Let's have a look with the professor who's still with us. So there we are, ANC way out there, 64%. But the EFF outscoring the DA, 16.25. No surprises there. Seems they've been led by a man from Seshogo near Polokwane. So what do you think the changes might be here? I mean, or is this going to be about it, do you think?
The EFF is expected to do well in Limpopo for all the reasons you've mentioned. The percentages might change as more and more votes come in. So there are huge white areas where there hasn't been any reporting, and the overall numbers of votes that we're looking at is on the whole quite small still. So their numbers, unless they can really bring in some big votes in some of the undeclared areas, that 16% is likely to go down a bit. So no surprise there. I think they will be above the provincial average in other provinces for the reasons that you've mentioned, the leadership coming from Limpopo, and they've had a particular appeal there in attacking the ANC in terms of the previous provincial government's power politics before the EFF was formed. There was a whole lot of discontent in Limpopo in particular that led into the formation of the EFF as well, and we'll see that reflected in some of the results.
I mean, how likely is it that the EFF will be a long-standing progressive movement? I mean, bearing in mind many of their leaders, as we know, are disaffected, former ANC, well, Youth League members mostly. Yeah. How likely is it you think it will grow into a party, like a second party in this country?
It's very hard to say. What I will say is this: if they don't change their modus operandi in terms of high-profile behavior in public institutions, and they don't build a more credible platform for campaigning and holding support, their support will seesaw. So you'll see jumps in terms of spectacles in Parliament, but that won't be sustained over time. So their challenge is to institutionalize themselves into a party with a machine that can have support roles, can canvass, and do all the hard work parties do in between elections to sustain themselves. And that, I think, is the challenge for a party like the EFF. It explains why COPE didn't survive its spectacular birth particularly well. They didn't have that machine. And the EFF has had a whole range of internal conflicts that still, to some extent, aren't resolved, which may also inhibit its ability to establish that organizational machine, to do the canvassing, to build the support, to consolidate the branches. Because without that, you're a flash in the pan.
Perhaps just, to add to that is the one-liner on this is nothing survives outside of the ANC. EFF is really the first party to have made this type of inroad outside of the ANC. And whilst not commenting on the political organ, I think what the EFF captures is the two-legged nature of the South African economy, South African society, the yawning deficit in youth unemployment. So whether it's the EFF or someone else, I would argue that it's really hard for a single party to capture what the types of interests that the ANC or the DA represents, as well as simultaneously capturing the interests of what EFF sets out to represent. So I would venture that there's a good chance of a third party or a second party capturing this set of interests.
I want to get your view, though, on how the business community might perceive this, because often the EFF and their philosophy, as well as a manifesto, has been dubbed to be quite radical, if that can be the case. Is this not going to scare off capital investors, whether they're domestic or foreign? What's your take on the sentiment so far with regard to the EFF and the economic policies?
I think the one thing that you always want to be very careful of is responding to what you think a political narrative will translate into. So rather than acting on what you think is going to transpire, you need to see what happens. Again, talking to the ANC, the way that the party has conducted itself over the last 20-odd years, if you think back to the early 1990s, the talk was about radical transformation, national ownership. That hasn't really transpired. Instead, you've seen a fairly conservative party conduct exceptionally sound macroeconomic policy, fiscal policy, monetary policy. This election, I think, speaks to the role of government in delivering services to businesses. And if you look at the frustration, the complaint about building effective, competitive organizations in South Africa, here is a critical issue that has to be addressed.
But then again, I mean, isn't this thing a good thing? We've got these parties emerging and challenging. I mean, I remember the election of '99. There was no question from start to finish that the ANC was going to sweep the board, and it did. And my theory of knowing a lot of the people in power in this country is that that kind of, shall we say, comfort, dare say, impunity of we can do what we like has gone now. People realise they've got to work a lot harder to get votes of people.
Yes, competition in the political arena is always very advantageous. If you're watching parties over your shoulder, it means you have to up your game. And if you know that you've got clear majorities into the future, it does mean that complacency sets in. So the fact that we've got this competition coming through very clearly now, where nothing is clear cut in the really important metros, that can only benefit citizens and voters in terms of enhancing the performance further of these institutions. So economic competition between firms is good. Prices go down, quality goes up. Competition between political parties, accountability and delivery and better value for money goes up as well. So it's all good for citizens in South Africa. The parties might be unhappy, but in terms of the country as a whole, it's a very good situation. I think we're quite fortunate to have it, actually.
And also look at the once all-powerful in Africa, UNIP in Zambia, MCP in Malawi. Once nothing moved without them, and they're just in the dustbin of history, virtually. But,
yeah, but the important thing here is when the majority parties there started to lose support, they fiddled the whole system. And this is why the IEC is so important. There might be cheating on the fringes, but to fiddle the system in such a way that you can swing an outcome, I'm prepared to say that that's impossible. I think that the checks and balances built into this mean that whatever the parties might think or feel, they're going to have to grin and bear the results because they will be significantly credible.
And I think this really reinforces the point about the mature, stable, transparent democracy.
And even last night we were talking about it, the counting process, where you have the people locked in a room and we all agree this is a vote, right? One. And it must take forever, but at least it's being done.
It does beg a question about biometric scanning and...
Exactly.
Oh, goodness.
Who's next?
Adrian, I'm hoping that we can actually get perspective on the economic hub, which we all know is Gauteng, and our colleagues in the background will help us get perspective on what the results look like. But from what I see on our screen here regarding the dashboard, it does seem like a tight race. The DA in the lead by 43%, well over 700,000 votes counted, followed by the ANC at 42%. So again, a very close call. From your perspective, you know, for the business community, you know, the view on these results, because again, what all investors want is certainty. And if the results are going to get this close and potential calls for a coalition government or swings in either direction, what do you think the response would be like, or the feelings on the ground?
I think the issue with the formation of a coalition government is it ushers in fresh uncertainty. We don't really know what to expect. So the first question would be, which coalition? As it stands, either party, either DA or ANC, could form a coalition with EFF to establish a majority government. So there's the first uncertainty, and the second is now that you've resolved that uncertainty, that's the coalition. How effective are they going to be in managing this critical economic hub? The short answer to that is we don't know.
So true. Looking at the numbers, sorry, just to point to the screen there, we do see City of Johannesburg very tight there between DA and ANC, and EFF also garnering support. So interesting to see the dynamics regarding the swings here, as you say. Yeah.
Look, the DA did establish a record of coalition government in the Western Cape, so they do have something that they can point to as in saying, that's what we did, we were able to achieve it through coalition. So there is that effective record, I would venture. But at this stage, you have to ask who will form the coalition.
Exactly.
And look no further than the examples of Greece, Italy, with constant flip-flopping of coalition and uncertainty, and that doesn't act as a supporter, as an enhancer of business. In fact, if anything, it compromises, it erodes.
I'd actually want to get your perspective on that too, because we do have the Western Cape dynamics on screen as well. Again, the DA significantly in the lead by more than 64%, followed by the ANC at 24%. And you have the pleasure of working both in Gauteng and the Western Cape. And yesterday we were talking about the best performing municipalities, right, Chris? Many of them based in the Western Cape. Does a great performing municipality enable and create economic opportunities for small businesses, for large corporates? You know, is there a link here between a well-functioning municipality and the contribution economically of that area?
Sure. All the way from establishing a plant How long does it take you to get your business rights? How long does it take you to connect to the grid, to get potable water delivered to your factory or plant? And then the functioning of the support systems, road networks. So is there effective road infrastructure? All of this sits at the municipal level. And I did make the observation earlier that I think what this level of government is critical in doing is giving effect to business. So, national government is about establishing the country agenda, macroeconomic policy. National government is not in the business of facilitating delivery. And the delivery here is critical. And South Africa is struggling. If you look at recent surveys, one of the primary complaints put by business to achieving their aims is delivery at the municipal level, delivery of key business services.
Well, coalitions, I've heard them referred to in my career as muted, which is perhaps going a bit far, but just to point out, the best performing Swellendam in the Western Cape is a coalition between the DA and the ACDP, and probably, as I say, not a lot of people know that. It shows it can work.
Well, there you go. You've just put a puncture in our...
Well, it can work. I mean, who knows? But it's going to be quite interesting at difficult times, I think, for a lot of people in the town halls. But my only fear is that it doesn't hamper services in the town halls, because I'm sure it's happened before, and it may happen again, is sometimes certain people will be leaving certain municipalities and new people will be coming in if there's new political masters. I know that there has been a disconnect in this country between the two, but how likely is that, do you think?
I think what this election's showing is that whoever and whatever coalition may be in power, they are going to have to deliver. Because if you want to get your majority in 2021, you've got to build a track record now. And that means that the systems are going to be reviewed irrespective of coalitions and new or old parties in power. There's going to be a re-energization of local government to the advantage of citizens and consumers of these municipal services. And that's where the competition comes in. You want to get more votes next time round, you've got to do things better now. And citizens can only benefit.
What do you think, Adrian?
Yeah, I think that the point around competition is critical. It removes complacency. It establishes the imperative. So I think that this is, to me, this is a really important evolution in South Africa's socio-political landscape. And coming into this municipal election, one of the observations was made that this is the most important election since '94, and in many ways I think that this sets the agenda, having flagged very clearly that the country is struggling from a macroeconomic perspective. We sit with this stretched unemployment figure, a huge youth unemployment burden, economic growth that is really struggling, and it really points the way to galvanizing words to action.
Bearing in mind what you're saying about the struggling economy, how likely is it ever, and I've been thinking about it the last couple of days, we've been talking to people about the elections, that people with money in this society here in South Africa could conceivably buy their way out of the system on a large scale, i.e. electricity, i.e. services, i.e. water, and what have you. Is that likely, you think, ever?
You mean effectively disintermediate the...
Yeah, by the way, completely. It happens in other countries, actually, in this continent.
Look, to some extent, it's already possible. It's very modest at many levels. So private education in South Africa, for instance, accounts for not much more than 2 or 3% of pupil headcount. But you've seen a surge in private electricity supply, energy supply, and the Renewable Energy IPP program has been a fantastic success by...
Let's hope it continues, right? Because Eskom's trying to rock the boat there. Oh, goodness.
We're not going to go there, are we? So by many accounts, that's been an extraordinary success. But notice that it's a partnership. It's a partnership between public and private. You know, water reticulation. And then if you are going to move products, on whose roads? So, you know, I think you can, to some extent, disintermediate. But to imagine that you could buy yourself out wholesale, I would say that that's just a push too far.
Maybe not in 10 years' time, because probably things that we accept now as impossible and difficult, maybe as the technology will change, maybe people will one day, I don't know. But as I say, it's one of the phenomena of this continent, people buying their way out of, as you say, education and lots of other systems. But, okay, gentlemen, well, thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you very much, Ivan, for your time and your analysis. Thank you very much, Dr. Iva Sarakinski from the Wits School of Governments at Wits University, and Dr. Adrian Saville, Chief Strategist at Citadel. We're going to a break now. We'll be back for more after this.